Hello, thanks for dropping by. Today I wanted to talk about sharpening bench chisels, another chapter in our Sharpology series. Today we're going to look at sharpening bench chisels, paring chisels, Mortise chisels and Japanese butt chisels. The most popular chisel is probably the bevel-edged bench chisel, used by many, comes in many sizes, and is very popular because it's general purpose use. Some woodworkers may sharpen these by hand, that is on a water stone for example, and move them up and down by hand. We like to use a honing guide mainly because it gives us the opportunity to come back and just do a micro bevel on the edge of on the end of the chisel blade, and not have to sharpen the whole bevel. And the micro bevel angle will be the same each time we come back to it, because we will use an angle setting jig to set the same angle each time we sharpen the chisel. So let's do this guy first. This is a bench chisel. We're going to sharpen this at an angle of 35 degrees. Now you don't need to get too excited or too concerned about different angles. A 35 degree or a 30 degree angle is probably the common angles for most chisels. A 35 degree micro bevel on this chisel will have a bit more strength and perhaps meat, if you want a better word, than a finer angle, which would sort of help us as far as making the chisel resist chips and that sort of thing. So we think 35 degrees is a really good angle for chisel. So we use the same water stones as we would use for sharpening plane blades or knives. I start on a 220 grit water stone. Just move it up and down, and I can already feel a burr on the back. That means that I'm right on the edge of that chisel, because the metal's been pushed around the corner and I'm right on the edge. So now I can move on to the 1000 grit stone. Always wipe the chisel in between grits. 5000 grit stone. This is not a necessary stone between 1000 and 8000, but it's handy. It's nice to have, but it's certainly not critical to have it. You can see the nice shiny bevel there. Now I'm on a 1000 grit stone. Sorry, I beg your pardon, an 8000 grit stone. And that edge is nicely polished now. Now as we move up those grits, the burr that I felt down here on the 220 stone will be smaller as we move up the grits, but it will still be there. So we have to remove that. Now this is the big difference between plain chisels and between chisels and plane blades. With a plane blade we often use the ruler trick, which tips the plane blade up a shade and make sure to get right on the edge of the back of that surface to take off that burr. With a chisel you don't want that to happen. The chisel's got to be flat all along the back, because you're often working flat, well you're always working flat on your workpiece, and you want the bottom of that blade to be flat onto the workpiece and not kicked up with a small back bevel. So the way I do it is to perhaps on the 5000 stone or the 1000 stone initially, just rub it back and forth over the edge, and you can sort of feel the burr coming off. And when that's off, you can feel that it's gone now. You can then perhaps polish the bottom half an inch or so of the chisel, perhaps on the 8000 stone, up and down like this. But really we've done the important work which is where the two surfaces meet, this edge and this side. As long as they meet in a sharp result, then we've got a sharp chisel. So that's the bevel-edged bench chisel. The next chisel is a paring chisel. Paring chisels are very similar to bench chisels, but they don't, normally they don't have a ramp. They're flat, and they do have a bevel on the side and a tiny land, which is probably only 1 millimetre or so wide, right on the edge. And these are for working, for paring, just for cleaning up the bottom of a rebate trough or whatever, and are normally, they're longer obviously than a bench chisel. You can see that there. Longer, more slender, but really we treat them the same as a bevel edge chisel, because that's what they really are. And in they go into the jig, 35 degrees set on the angle setting jig, and away we go up the grades. 220, 1000, 5000, go back to front, sorry, 5000 and then 8000. So that's not much difference to the bevel edged chisel or bench chisel. Now we come to the mortise chisel. Mortise chisels are much thicker through their side elevation. They have a ramp like a bench chisel, but are much heavier. Often the width and the height is higher than the width of the actual chisel. So this is to give them strength. It also helps them line up in the mortise when you're cleaning out a mortise. I think a good mortise chisel should have parallel sides. Others will argue they'd rather have a taper of 1 degree on the side so that they can get through that it doesn't jam in the mortise. There's arguments either way about that, but nevertheless they have tall sides and don't have a bevel that we can set in our. And previously we had a little dovetail shape in there which jammed the edge of the bevel chisel in, made it nice and tight and straight and perpendicular, 90 degrees to the jig. But with a mortise chisel, they're harder to hold. We've just developed a new product to enable us to hold mortise chisels well, and that is the Mortise Chisel Jaws. Now these jaws just fit over our existing honing guide. They're made out of German aircraft aluminium, and they fit they just come inside the jaws a bit, which gives you a small platform there just to locate the chisel, and then they have sides which really hold the chisel firmly. Again, you can use the angle setting jig, work exactly the same. That's tight in there now, and away we go to sharpen that mortise chisel through the grades 220, 1000, 5000 and 8000. This is the same system as the bevel chisel with it, bevel edge chisel, but now we've got these locked. So the fourth chisel in our set of chisels today is a butt chisel, or a Japanese butt chisel. These are similar to bevel edge chisels, except they're much shorter in length. Now that makes them very hard to hold in our jaws, because we haven't got enough room at the back to hold them nice and firm and to have enough extension of the blade to get the angle we want. So what we do is add extension jaws to our honing guide, which is similar to the Mortise Chisel Jaws, but they're longer. And they extend the jaws. They've got the same dovetail type shape inside here to hold the bevel chisel, because these are bevel chisels in effect. This one's curved, this one's straight, so that when we put this Japanese chisel in here, we can get a good angle extension. As you can see there, that's all locked up and solid. That is just about 35 degrees. And again, we sharpen the same way. Up and down, there's no difference to what we did before, but this extension jaws gives us the ability to hold short blades, or short chisel blades, or butt chisels. And that works very well. Same system. Of course, when you get to the end of the process, you've got a small burr on the back, back and forth across the edge of the blade, and then perhaps some transverse strokes to clean up the back. You can polish the back of a chisel. It needs to be flat, certainly. Good quality woodworkers' chisels will have a flat back anyway, but if you want to make sure they are flat back, we can certainly just work the back of a chisel up and down across the grits again to flatten the back of the blade. If it's not flat, I'll just polish it up. But really remember, of course, that we're cutting here on the edge. We're not cutting halfway up the chisel. We're cutting using the edge to cut with, which is important. But it is also important to have a flat back on a chisel, because often you're sitting on the timber of the workpiece. You want that nice and flat. So that's basically how we sharpen these 4 chisels, with a few extensions and extra jaws on our regular honing guide. And with those two sets of jaws, you've probably got most chisels covered. One last bit of advice, that when you're using a chisel, this blade is not in a jig like it is in a plane. If you call a plane a jig, which really holds if that was the plane blade, the plane holds the blade in a jig, and you're playing with it. This thing, the blade is out in the open. So it's really important that when you're using it, both hands are behind the blade. So some guys say, well, I push with this one and I break with this one. I like to, depending on the job, paring away and just keep both hands behind that blade for safety purposes. Well, thanks for today, dropping by. I hope we've helped a bit in sharpening your chisels. Please contact us if you have any questions about our tools or sharpening. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.